Hi, everyone. Welcome to Soulprint. My name is Cindy. Thank you very, very much for being here. So I'm not going to do cards today. I'm going to use channeling. So much has been going on with 45, and nothing is working out very well, right? I mean, the courts aren't letting him do what he wants to do. He's shuffling everything up to the Supreme Court in hopes that they will. Um, he vanished for a few days last weekend, and there was a lot of discussion about that. And it, he's got his Secretary of Health, RFK Jr., just making an unholy mess of stuff. And so I thought it would be a good time to sort of take a peek and see what's going on behind the scenes. Because, I mean, this is a man who's not calm and collected at the best of times. And I imagine this doesn't qualify anywhere near the best of times. Um, so let's just take a peek and see what's going on there. What's going on behind the scenes? Okay, the first thing they want to tell me is that in some ways they're saying we need to pay more attention to what Stephen Miller is doing because he's the little voice in 45's ear when it comes to all things immigration. And it's becoming like ridiculous, right? I mean, now he's threatening to send his troops into Chicago. And, this is the thing. I don't think anybody says, well, we should just let all of these people come into the country who are, causing trouble. But that's not who's getting thrown out of the country. And I understand that there have been about 1 million people that have been deported. But I understand that apparently the target number is 10 million. And already you have problems in the construction center, um, in construction, in agriculture, because you don't have the workers to do the work that frankly, white people don't want to do. I mean, sorry, but that seems to be what's going on there. So what they've done is just they're just shuffling people out of the country and they're not giving any thought to, okay, well then how do the farmers get their crops off? And how do stuff get built? Speaking of building, he's also got a bit of a problem on his hands because Canada has now suspended delivery of soft lumber product out of Ontario. It's just stopped. Now, apparently, the United States gets approximately 35% of the lumber it uses from Canada. So right now, they're short 35% of what they require. And apparently, there are a few other countries that they're getting some lumber from. But when you combine the countries, I think it's three of them, it doesn't even add up to 5%. So there's still this 30% shortfall. And they're saying at this point that, you know, housing prices, you can anticipate them going up from between $10,000 and $30,000 just as a result of this lumber situation. We're not even talking about the car situation and automobile sector. Everywhere he looks, it's a disaster. And he truly believes that if he does something often enough, people are just going to believe it. I mean, I saw an interview he did with, I can't remember her name, but a well respected journalist. And he said the economy is the best it's ever been. And she said, that's not true. And he said, yes, it is, and blah, blah, blah. And she said, that's not true. Yes, it is, blah, blah, blah. So he won't receive any information that contradicts what's going on. But what's happening is you can see that the town halls are becoming more and more aggressive. People have had enough. And it's like, you're the rep. Why aren't you doing what you're supposed to be doing? slowly but surely, you see that foundation starting to crack with the Republican Party because, political animals are political animals, right? And I mean, they want to retain their power. Well, they can't retain their power if 45 is just destroying everything all over the place. I mean, your unemployment rate has skyrocketed. The your national debt is like through the roof, and he's only been in office for like 8 months. So the people around him, I mean, that's the energy I'm focusing on. Um, what you've got, it's interesting because it's almost like you have like a split screen, right? They go out in public and they're smiling and everything's like there are no problems, everything is great. And you know what? If these cities, are saying like they don't need, the military roaming their streets and ICE agents chasing people down the road, well, you know what? They are crimes, and so we're just going to deal with it. So they have this public persona, and then they get behind the cameras or get away from the cameras or get in somewhere private, and they're like, "Good God!" Right? So the people that are out there yakking, and especially what is her name? Caroline, the press secretary. Um, y- she can be as much of a sycophant as she wants, but the reality is that you don't have to go searching to find the bad news. His ratings are down in everything. No one believes he can handle the economy. He can handle immigration. He can handle foreign affairs. He can handle healthcare. There's nothing that he isn't underwater at. He is now sitting at about a 70% disapproval rating. And so now what you're going to start seeing is, and you saw it just last week with McConnell, who is finally coming out and saying, this isn't good, or this isn't right, or I don't like it, or I don't approve of it. The same thing happened before the last election where people who were choosing not to run again, they were the ones who started speaking up and saying, this is insane what is going on. And you're going to have that same cycle again. The problem is that not only are you going to have, those people giving cover to some other, um, politicians in some red states, or worse, in purple states, who are um, struggling because their constituents are beyond frustrated. They're beyond furious. Everything that they said was going to get fixed has been destroyed. And that means their kitchen table issues. So you've got it like it's like a split screen. Um, what they're saying in public is just whatever comes out of their mouth, frankly. What's going on behind the scenes, though, is that there is a great deal of concern about everything that's spiraling. So not only do you have an issue with his physical health, there is definitely some sort of an issue with his cognitive or mental health. And we know that this is a person who, when somebody pushes him, he pushes back twice as hard. And so, and he hates anybody like making fun of him or even disagreeing with him. That's just enough to get put in his black book. Maybe that's the wrong color book, considering you probably had a black book. We'll pick another color. So, I'm speaking of black books, right? You've got the whole Epstein thing going on, and those um, incredibly brave women who have stepped forward are now not going to be quiet because they're going to continue to gather public support. And he's going to find that becomes a bigger and bigger issue and a harder one to dodge. So there's a lot going on. And honestly, and I've said this before, we're now in September, and there were a lot of things that got kind of cut and slashed along the way. But kids weren't in schools, and so families weren't being quite as impacted by sort of the lunch thing, right? Those kinds of like the SNAP program, like those sorts of supplemental help that was being handed, being given to the people in need, and that's gone. And so now more and more people are going to start feeling the impact. Not only is that an issue, but everything around them is escalating in price. So he doesn't have a way to, at this point, to backtrack. So all he can do is keep on saying the same thing over and over again, which is everything's fine, it's wonderful, it's amazing. And the rest of like the United States, like 70% and probably of the United States and probably like 70 or 80% of the world is looking at him going, you were worse than like the court gesture. You were like literally a fool. And nothing you say or do can be trusted or counted on. And in some ways, that's actually not an accurate statement because when he says these really, really outrageous things, he's actually thinking about it. Okay. Now, that doesn't mean he's going to be successful. Sometimes he just says it because he's, kind of trying to get a feel for how people are going to react or respond. But the reality is that you have a situation here where the people around him are panicking and spiraling. He's spiraling. And then you have this public nonsense image thing that's going on that literally only the hardest of the hardest core megas are still believing. I mean, so many people who voted for him, for whatever their reasons were, are now going, oh my God, like I contributed to this, right? My vote helped get this idiot into office, and he's destroying the very country I live in. So, now, there's a couple things I just want to touch on. There has been a lot of chatter about the 2-day absence, um, and something called an, I don't know what it's called, an Elvane, something. It has, it's quite a device that is like a pump, and it keeps the heart pumping. Now, I'm not getting information that that is what was done. There was something done. There was sort of some sort of a contraption or a device, but whatever it was that was that, whatever the medical situation was around that time away, it's less obvious. It is definitely something to do with the heart and keeping the heart functioning, but it's not that thing, because apparently that thing that I can't remember, it's like given to the worst of the worst of the worst. And even as president, if you got somehow bumped up on the list, apparently medical doctors are saying that's like a 2-week recovery in like ICU. Okay, this is not what happened, but there was definitely something that went on. So on top of everything else, the people in his immediate circle are well aware of the fact that his health is not going to improve. Um, I heard somebody say that and it was a fascinating way to look at it. They said, just statistically, nothing else, just looking at it statistically, this man only has something like a 30% chance of serving out his whole term. So what can we expect? Because it already feels like everything is just sort of nutty. Um, Spirit wants you to continue to do the work you're doing, that you're sending light, you're sending positive energy, you're doing your level best to not um, fall into the fear and anxiety and stress cycle, because it does no good. All it does is feed the very energy that you're trying to get away from, right? Or you're trying to push back against. And you can anticipate that the pressure on the White House and on him in particular is going to continue to increase. It's, I want to say, like, from now through the end of the year, you're just going to see this continual escalation of deterioration. Um, and he he's he's going to go on a little bit of a what they're saying is like a firing binge, right? So there's going to be a lot of um, people resigning all of a sudden, or him basically just saying you're fired in public, 'cause that's what he does. Um, and there's going to continue to be investigations or hearings that are nothing more than a distraction. And there's going to be like a lot of like smoke and mirror stuff that's going on. So it's really, really important going forward that you just, if you find yourself getting immersed into it, pull back, take a few deep breaths, and realize that what you are watching is, I don't want to use the term, but it's the only one they're giving me, like dark magic, right? And I don't necessarily mean that in, the devil with the horns, and it's more about energy that is coming from such a dark place, from a place of uncontrollable power and greed and cruelty, that that's what's getting pushed out there, and it's going to continue. I'm sorry to tell you that, but it's going to continue. You can look at this period of time that we're in, going, I almost want to say from now until like late winter almost, is what I unfortunately want to say. I'm thinking like maybe somewhere in February things will start to um I don't even know what. It feels like by time we get to January and February, it feels very, very much like we're going to be able to start seeing paths forward with some clarity. Um, and so between now and then, you can anticipate him getting worse on all fronts. The people who run out and talk to people, in the media, saying more and more insane things. Um, Town halls becoming even more aggressive and more loud. There's going to be a lot of distraction stuff that's going on. But what I want to tell you is that in this sort of a situation, this is about almost like critical mass, right? It has to get so bad that that's when things actually start breaking so they can get repaired and fixed. And that is sort of the energy I see over the next few months. And certainly the inner circle around him becomes more and more panicked, and more worried. There's going to be, it just feels like a lot of staff changeover that's going on. But let's remember the first thing that was said was, let's keep an eye on Stephen Miller, because he has an agenda that literally comes from, the 1930s in Germany. Um, that's his headspace. That's his thinking. This is like a genocide. Um, he wants this country that was built on immigrants to become a country of only one kind of people who believe the same thing. And as of right now, even though um, the Heritage Foundation has gotten quieter, they are still pushing, and they're pushing hard against people in power, right? Congressmen, state representatives, the courts. Um, because as I've said before, the energy you're dealing with is sort of this is all falling apart. This is all blowing up. Let's cram as much stuff in so we can get done. Just push it forward and try to get as much of our stuff done, accomplished on the books. Because if nothing else, it will at least take a lot of energy and time to unweave it. And while it's being, unweaved, unwoven, um, you're going to be able to continue to practice, or have laws on the books that are far more in keeping with your personal, bigoted, misogynistic, racist, I don't need to go on attitudes. So, lots of deep breaths, lots of pulling back. Um, you don't need every single detail, because the details shift and change so often. It's honestly hard to keep track of them. Um, yeah, so that's what I want to say. I just want to make one sort of housekeeping point. When I'm doing the pendulum readings, or even a reading like this, I get pictures in my head. So even though I might be saying JFK instead of RFK, the picture in my head is of Robert Kennedy Jr. Okay. And so most people just understand that I am channeling information. It is flying into me very, very quickly. And if I can't remember a name or something, give me some grace, because the vast majority of you already know what I'm talking about. Okay. Until next time, take care and be well. Bye for now.